then what are the defining symptoms of autism? And we might even just want to rephrase that. If we don't want to use the word symptoms, use whatever word that works for you, I suppose. So
Yeah. So, I mean, I probably would prefer a word like behaviors or characteristics, something that's, a bit more sort of neutrally descriptive, not trying to assign value judgments to things. And in terms of what they are, um, there's been some disagreement about this historically. Currently, according to the Almighty Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which apparently nobody is permitted to disagree with in certain circles, there are two major domains: social communication differences in autism, described as deficits, and restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior and interest. And I am not one of those people who refuses to criticize the DSM. I have, there's some issues there in that publication, and I definitely don't think that it's definitive as to what exactly is going on. I would first of all take a step back and ask the question: well, what is autism anyway? Is it a thing? Is it a social construct? I would come down on the side of it's a social construct. It's an entity that we invented to talk about a group of people with some behaviors that we find to be sort of kind of similar, but an incredibly diverse group of people in every possible respect. And there are certain behaviors that we have defined autism as in the DSM, but I wouldn't necessarily describe them in the same way that the DSM does. I would say that there's definitely some social communication differences. I wouldn't necessarily say they're deficits. There's interesting research, for example, suggesting that a lot of autistic people, particularly autistic people without intellectual disabilities, I guess, can find it actually perfectly fine to communicate socially with other autistic people or in particular contexts. It's actually only when you throw autistic people together with neurotypical people that you can sometimes see communication gaps. There was this fascinating study where information transmission was just as good with autistic people only and with neurotypical people only, but once you throw autistic and neurotypical people together, totally broke down. So social communication differences can be disabilities, but not deficits, which is an important distinction that I'd be happy to say more about later. And then as for the restricted repetitive behaviors, etc., that's kind of actually just starting to be seen, I think, as a catch-all domain for everything that's not social or communication. Work, for example, by Rachel Grove, I think it was recently, is suggesting that actually there's multiple independent, quite different things in that domain. So, for example, stimming behaviors. For example, I am right now flapping my arm. You can't necessarily see me, but you can know for a fact that I am flapping my arm as a demonstration of a kind of stimming behavior. And that's very distinct from some of the sensory processing differences that I mentioned before, like the sensory distress or also intense pleasurable sensory interests. There's a lot of autistic people, for example, who are very into music for that reason. So those are just a couple of examples of two quite different things that kind of get lumped in there.
Right.